Hello. So that's my name. That's the name of my talk. I'm a guy who makes roguelikes. I do make other games, but this is specifically about roguelikes, and those are the kinds of games I make. So, yeah. So, I'm sure if being in the game, if you ever follow games, you probably heard the term roguelikes. You probably have seen it being thrown around like games with roguelike elements in it. But I'm curious about how many people actually properly know what a roguelike is, because it's not like a fairly new term. It's not like a new fad or anything. It's actually been something that's been going on for it's a genre that's been going on for quite a number of years, and it has a very interesting niche history to it. So first off, what is a roguelike? Well, in order to answer that, basically you have to answer the precursor to roguelikes, which is this game, Rogue. So this was a game that was created in 1980 by 4 students, Michael Toy, Glenn Wickman, Ken Arnold, and John Lane. And it was built purely for on-screen computer terminals. So graphics are obviously very limited to ASCII characters. It was all on a grid structure, and the more advanced thing about it was that it had randomly generated levels, so that each had so as you can see there, multiple randomly sized rooms, each having their own paths to get into, and it was kind of basically a turn-based dungeon exploring game where you fight monsters, travel through rooms, and basically last as long as possible. Your health would deplete every time you walked, so you actually had to be careful about where you're moving in order to, because wasting too many moves and you'll eventually die of hunger. And this game was ended up being ported to a lot of computers throughout the 80s, and it got a lot of popularity through the student academic scene. Eventually, there were people who were they wanted to make their own rogues, so they made games that are like Rogue. Hence, they are roguelikes. They're like rogues, they're roguelikes. That is where you get the classic roguelikes that you see here. So we have NetHack, Dwarf Fortress, and Angband. So these are the ones that purely took on the basic elements of Rogue, and they did advance some little bits about it. Like they probably added some puzzles. They probably made the combat more complex. They probably diversified, like what you can do in the rooms or what enemies you can fight. But at their very core, these were the games that heavily inspired from Rogue. And a notable thing about these is that these were very independently made. So for these 3 examples, with the exception of NetHack, these were made mostly by 2 people, and even then NetHack started off back in the 80s by just 1 person, and now just has slowly over time built a small team that regularly maintains it to this day. That's also the other thing about roguelikes. These games are still being maintained. Dwarf Fortress, if you know, was put onto Steam a few years ago, and it still gets regularly updated to this day. But as time goes on, roguelikes did get modernized, although they still kept their true elemental nature. So on the left we have Rogue, which is a roguelike that's been in constant development since 2009, and on the right we have Jupiter Hell, which is a game that was actually a spiritual successor to a previous game made by a developer called Doom RL, which, as probably the name suggests, is actually Doom that has been written to work like a roguelike, and really well, in fact. Like you're actually like exploring in the hellscape of Mars, fighting off all the monsters and demons as your Doom guy, and it's all played off like a rogue. So Jupiter Hell basically advances on that by having an advanced 3D graphic. By having the advanced 3D graphics, it has voice acting in it, much better music, and being a lot more dynamic. I kind of more describe it as being like what if Doom 3 was a roguelike. But it shows that what's considered the traditional roguelike element still kind of works to this day, and can still get more and can have its slight advancements, but people still love those traditional elements. So much so that you do get modern in indie games, particularly that want to use the roguelikes, but branch it out a bit. Like, what if I had a roguelike that? What if I had a roguelike, but I wanted to make it play more like a 2D platformer, or what if I wanted to play more like a twin-stick shooter? This is where you get Roguelikes, which this is probably an unpopular opinion among roguelike developers and gamers, but I'm not actually a fan of that term. It feels kind of more demeaning to say if you're like one thing, because I think if you want to make a game that's roguelike, that's like a roguelike, but you wanted to you get away from like the grid structure, the ASCII art style or stuff, you can still call it a roguelike. You might want to call it like an action roguelike or a platforming roguelike or stuff. But roguelites just reminds you like if you want to have stuff like Bud Light, where it's just like non-alcoholic beer, just less of what you want. So personally, I would refer to Spelunky as a platforming roguelike, Binding of Isaac as a twin-stick roguelike, but and that's just my hot take. So as I said, I have made my roguelikes in the past. Just to give you a basic idea of which ones these ones are. So on the left is RDDL. I personally recommend this as like if you want a basic understanding of what baseline traditional roguelike is. So it's grid structure. So it's a grid-based game. That's like turn-based turn-based role-playing combat. You got ASCII art. Health depletes every time you move, so you have to be strategic of where you're moving. And each room also has a little lock and key puzzle, so you have to actually find the key in order to get to the next room. Dungeon Racer was a bit more of an experimental one, where I thought, hey, wouldn't it be cool if I made a roguelike that was a racing game? And then I also thought, for some reason, hey, why not make it a rhythm-based game as well? I kind of sort of got it working, but I had problems with the input response. So maybe if I had a bit more time, I could have narrowed it down better, or just maybe find a better way to handle the racing element again. And who knows? But you learn from these things. But this is the roguelike that I particularly am proud of and like to boast about, because this is a game that I've been working on for nearly 2 years, and even more than that technically. So this is what I describe as either a twin-stick roguelike or an action roguelike. So it's a roguelike in the sense that you are exploring caverns or dungeons, you're fighting monsters, ASCII art style, permadeath. You got one permadeath, so one life, one chance through this, one randomly generated dungeon. But it's also a action or twin-stick shooter in the game by feeling and playing like a twin-stick shooter. This game is also with the main goal of being collecting gemstones, fighting the monsters. This game's out on Switch and on both the Nintendo Switch and Steam as well, if you're interested and want to look at it. So one thing I find particularly interesting about the roguelike community and why I like looking into and making roguelikes is that this has a pretty unique community. It's like I'm into other genres, of course, like platformers, shmups, of course, but you don't often find like podcasts and conferences specifically dedicated to game development in a specific genre, like you do with roguelikes, with Roguelike Celebration, and before then you had the International Roguelike Developer Conference, which literally toured around the world. You don't have like dedicated wikis to roguelike development or websites and forums on that case. But for the roguelike community, there is a lot of that, and there's a lot of in-depth discussion. I mean, this has been going on since the 80s when Rogue came out. All of this is like freely available to look up and online. Roguelike Celebration is a conference in the United States, and you'll find in like the big game conferences there are also roguelike meetups where you can meet up with fellow roguelike developers. And also there's also a specialized roguelike games jam. So this is actually coming up this weekend. It's called 7-Day Roguelike. It's been running since 2005. And the premise is basically simple. You just have 7 complete days to build a roguelike. I need to speed up, sorry. So basically, you could just make any kind of roguelike you want. I've seen roguelikes that have played like game shows, roguelikes where you're in space, roguelikes where you're in a dungeon and all that. But you will also get some interesting examples. Here's some more famous ones. This is a Cogmind, which was an entry for Roguelike 7-Day Roguelike 2012, where you're basically going around You're basically going around in a machine, in a building, hacking in various terminals to make your way through and fighting bots and AIs and all that. And then you also have Dicey Dungeons. This was technically made as a 7-Day Roguelike entry in 2018. This was done by Terry Kavanagh, who's probably most famous for VVV. And so he started off basically making a roguelike where you just use dice for actual combat. And while he didn't finish it for 7-Day Roguelike, he ended up carrying on working on it, and now it's one of his popular games on Steam. There's a lot of things you can do with roguelikes. You can stay traditional, you can diversify it a bit. If they might say, oh, it's not really a roguelike, it's a roguelike, I forget them. But if you want to understand more about roguelike, if you want to try out 7-Day Roguelike, like I said, it's coming up. It's started this weekend. You can check out the subreddits, and there's also a Discord where you can speak to a whole load of roguelike developers. Thank you for your time.